Ernest Miller was a 23-year-old dancer when he met Jeffrey Dahmer outside of a bookstore, the same one Dahmer would go on to meet yet another victim at, and got invited to his apartment under the pretense that he would be paid $50 to pose nude for Dahmer's beloved Polaroid camera. Shortly after arriving and beginning to prepare the drinks, Dahmer realized that he only had 2 sedatives left. He usually used 3. He decided to go ahead and use the ones he had, and Miller fell unconscious after enjoying his drug drink. Presumably because of the smaller dosage, his chemically induced slumber didn't last very long, and he woke up shortly after. Dahmer panicked, not wanting him to leave, and fatally stabbed him in the throat with a knife that was laying nearby. He then hovered over Miller's body, taking photographs with his Polaroid camera as the young man lay on the carpet bleeding to death. Dahmer dissolved his body in acid, except for the biceps, which were wrapped and put in the freezer, soaked his bones in bleach, and kept the entire skeleton in his closet. Rest in peace, Ernest Miller. On September 24, 1990, David Thomas was hanging out at the mall after a couple relatives had dropped him off when he was first approached by Dahmer. Thomas was a 23-year-old man from a good family that he was close with, and he had 2 children that loved him. While chatting with each other at the mall, Dahmer somehow convinced Thomas to accompany him back to his apartment. Once there, Dahmer gave him a sedative-laced drink and he was soon unconscious. In a sudden change of mind, Jeffrey decided that Thomas wasn't his type. Fearing the retaliation he would likely receive if he let him sleep it off, Dahmer decided to strangle him to death anyway. Afterwards, he performed his usual routine of dismembering the man, which he video recorded and took photographs of, before dissolving the flesh in acid, keeping the full skeleton in his closet next to the skeleton of Ernest Miller. From Thomas, he also saved the biceps and wrapped them in plastic bags to be placed in the freezer, these, too, placed next to Miller's. The extremely graphic Polaroids Jeffrey took of the dismemberment process are what Thomas's sister ended up having to identify his body with. Rest in peace, David Thomas. Curtis Strader was a 19-year-old aspiring model, patiently waiting at a Milwaukee bus stop on February 18, 1991 when Dahmer approached and lured the boy to apartment 213 to take nude photos, promising him $50. Curtis is the only victim of Dahmer's that he didn't drug first. Instead, Dahmer immediately strangled the young man with his belt while receiving oral sex from him, then dismembered him. He kept Strader's skull to preserve after crushing the rest of his bones, disposing the boy's remains in the dump. Rest in peace, Curtis Strader. Errol Lindsay was another unfortunate 19-year-old boy that agreed to pose nude for Jeffrey's camera in exchange for $50. They began talking in April of 1991 outside of the same bookstore Dahmer had lured Ernest Miller away from 6 months prior, and the situation played out for Errol in the same way. He fell unconscious after consuming a drug drink, but this time Jeffrey wanted to try out an experiment he had in mind. He had decided that he wanted a living companion that lacked conscious thought, rendering them completely submissive to Jeffrey. He attempted to achieve this for the first time by power drilling a hole into Errol's skull while he was passed out and injected muriatic acid into his brain. Errol woke up, likely due to his skull being drilled into, but was acting perfectly fine. He knew where he was and who he was with. Jeffrey, in a moment of frustrated failure, drugged Lindsay once more and strangled him to death. Dahmer then had oral sex with the young corpse before dismembering him and disposing of the body. He kept Lindsay's skull as a sick reminder of the event. Lindsay's sister gained slight fame after her victim impact statement at trial due to the fact that she charged at Dahmer, screaming, "I hate you, Jeffrey," and hurling expletives at him. It took 5 burly officers to hold the small woman back from killing Jeffrey with her bare hands. Rest in peace, Errol Lindsay. Anthony Hughes was a 31-year-old deaf and mute man whose end was, accidentally, met at the hands of Jeffrey Dahmer. They had known each other for a while. Anthony was a popular guy. He knew sign language and could read lips, never letting his disabilities get in his way. According to Dahmer's account of the evening, he had passed a note to Anthony at a gay bar offering him $50 to come hang out at his apartment, presumably suggesting he model for nude photos, to which Anthony wrote back, "Sure." Anthony's mother slammed Jeffrey's statement during his trial, exclaiming that Anthony had $400 when he left home that day and didn't need his $50. Inside Dahmer's apartment, he rendered Anthony unconscious with crushed sedatives hidden in his drink. Dahmer then drilled a hole into his skull and injected acid into the cranial cavity while he was knocked out, his second attempt at experimenting on a victim to try and create a sex slave zombie. His first attempt was on his most recent victim from a month prior, Errol Lindsay, but Lindsay woke up seemingly unaffected, so Dahmer strangled him. In Anthony's case, the acid injection killed him. Jeffrey claimed that he didn't intend to kill him, but rather, he hoped for Anthony to become zombie-like. Dahmer left the innocent man's corpse rotting in the bedroom for several days before dismembering him and dissolving his body in acid. Dahmer kept Anthony's skull to add to his disturbing collection. Rest in peace, Anthony Hughes. Konarak Synthesumphone, 14, was murdered by Dahmer on May 27, 1991. Coincidentally, his brother Kaysun was drugged and molested by Jeffrey 1 year prior, but Kaysun escaped and Jeffrey was charged with sexual assault and enticing a child. The following year, Dahmer spotted the younger sibling at Grand Avenue Mall, neither one realizing who the other was, and offered young Konarak $50 to come back to his place with him. He drugged Konarak with what was likely Xanax and raped him before drilling a hole into his skull and injecting muriatic acid into his brain. The child remained unconscious and Jeffrey grew frustrated that his experiment had failed once again, so he left and spent a few hours drinking at a bar nearby. While Dahmer was out getting increasingly intoxicated, Konarak woke up and managed to escape apartment 213, stumbling into the street naked, beaten, lobotomized, bleeding, and barely able to see, think, or stand. When Dahmer returned, he found Konarak sitting with 2 black women who were tending to the traumatized kid. He tried to drag Konarak back into the apartment with him. But while Konarak fought against him, the police pulled up. The worried women had called 911, explaining that a naked and badly beaten child was wandering the street and in need of help. Dahmer told the police that the Laotian boy was his 19-year-old lover named John Mung, who'd had too much to drink as he did from time to time, and the policeman laughed it off as a drunken lover's quarrel even as the women cried out in protest. Konarak was unable to explain or defend himself due to the drugs in his system and the experimentation performed on his young brain just hours before, leaving him completely incoherent. Additionally, he didn't know how to speak much English. Without any other real defense, he refused to get up and go with Jeffrey, so the police picked him up by the arms and carried him to apartment 213. Here, Konarak's clothes were folded neatly and Jeffrey showed the officers a couple photos of the boy in a pair of black underwear as proof of their relationship. Satisfied, the police left the apartment. As soon as they were gone, Jeffrey injected another shot of acid into the frontal lobe of the child's brain, killing him. He then dismembered the boy's tiny body. A few days later, a newspaper story was released in regards to a missing Laotian child. Glenda Cleveland, the mother of one of the 2 girls that tried to protect Konarak, called the police department to tell them the boy from a few days prior looked just like the missing boy from the paper. No one was ever sent to talk with her about it. Rest in peace, Konarak Synthesumphone, you brave, precious sweetheart.